Welcome back to the Octopus Movement podcast. This is our sanctuary for nonlinear minds, where we celebrate unconventional thinkers and tap into their unique power to change the world. I am your host for today, Isis Fabian, and very excited to be here with another founding member, Dr. Amy Baker. Amy has a diverse background that spans pharmacy administration, clinical and retail practice, disaster response, and public health, and is a trailblazer in humane health, whose mission is to revolutionize healthcare by empowering professionals with the tools to lead with empathy, engagement, and confidence. A very tall order, given the state of healthcare today. Amy, thank you so much for being here. Tell us, and you can answer this question however you want to. This is kind of just my big open-ended starting question.
Yeah.
How does nonlinear thinking shape what you do?
Besides the fact that I'm now surrounded by nonlinear thinkers, and it's lovely and chaotic and fun and creative and crazy.
Amazing.
And inspiring. How does it inform what I do? Is that what was that?
How does it shape what you do, and maybe the way you do it, whatever comes up for you?
Yeah, I think one of my superpowers is to synthesize a lot of information that seems like it's coming from totally different places or branches of study or whatnot, and to see how they connect, and like the mycelium, of fungi and the movement. And I think that's really how it informs so much of what I've been speaking about, and hopefully what we'll touch on. It's just that synthesis of what seemingly disparate ideas and concepts.
The cross-disciplinary. I mean, I think especially with the age of like AI and all the meta crisis that our world faces today, like this cross-disciplinary pattern recognition, systems thinking capacity is so important. And one of my favorite things about a lot of the nonlinear thinkers in our world. So we're talking about a lot of different topics today, but all kind of circling around healthcare and human health and how we define and think of our health. So one broad question to start with is like, what do you see being really important on the path forward to bringing that humanity back into healthcare, to ending the objectification and commodification of human care needs? Like, what are some of the biggest things that need to change?
Well, and the reason I use humane health is because we don't treat humans as humans. In healthcare, we, like you said, they're treated like commodities and numbers, and it's a really tall order to take into account people's trauma history and whatnot. I think what we're lacking, we're starting to look at patients and their trauma history and trying to create ways to be more inclusive and trauma informed and whatnot. I won't go into how those policies are usually not well followed. It's like a checkbox that a business does, but they don't actually do it. But what we're missing, I feel, is taking care of our providers so that they can take care of the patients. We don't take those trauma-informed practices and carry them over to the providers enough. And I think that's really the missing link, because I'll watch my language. Everything rolls downhill, good and bad. And when we look at our leadership, if they are acting from a triggered, emotional, traumatic space, which they usually aren't aware of, that is going to trickle down. And so in my perspective, I think the biggest lever to make these changes is to work with leadership, upper leadership, and help them become aware of it, so that then they can see with their staff what's actually going on, because they see it from inside of themselves.
Right. And healthcare, that's life or death, right? That the implications of that. Because when I hear you say that, I'm like, well, true in every industry, right? Because I work more with like corporate leadership, and then the trauma trickles down, the trauma responses. There's people then imitating the trauma responses of executives in order to get promoted. Because like, that's what success looks like at this company, right? I yell at people and scream. So it's like, but what you're talking about is really the most kind of acute and dire probably version of that. So wow, what an interesting reframe. You talk about what's working, focusing on what's working in healthcare. Also for us as like individuals, when we talk about, you know, changing like an individual leader, for instance, to start to recognize those things instead of focusing on problems, right? And that's a big part of the healthcare industry is the diagnosis, the problem, the symptoms, the acute situation, and that focus on what's missing, what's wrong, what's causing problems runs so deep in all aspects of our culture. Even just like I notice my own like thought patterns at any given time, and my brain's trying to think of something to focus on, right? It's like, what's the thing that's wrong? What's the thing that needs to be solved? What's something I can worry about, right? Can you say more about this concept and how focusing on what's working is potentially the best route to solving a lot of our problems?
Yeah, so we do have a negativity bias, which you just brought up, and our brain is focused on that for survival. It's just what we do. But if you, so I believe in a lot of my training and the meditation practices and Dr. John DeMartini and whatnot, it all comes down to life is balanced and there are equal positives and negatives at any point in time. When we're not able to see the balance in life and in any situation, our brain is literally polarized and we are acting from more the animal brain and less from the executive functioning. And working from the animal brain means we're in survival, we're releasing cortisol, we're stressed out. So part of looking at what's working, there's multiple parts to it, but say as an individual who's being diagnosed, let's say, looking at what's actually working or working in my relationship or working in my job helps balance that perception so that we can be more resourced in our nervous system, in our brain, so we can think rationally about what steps to take, what problems actually need to be solved.
Right.
And when we look at healthcare, there's money to be made in the problem, so we focus on the problem. But when we look at what's working, there's usually not a drug for what's working, so we don't make money off of it. But if we capitalize on what's working and saying, well, you're making these changes, that's great, and let's support this part of your body, like, oh, your immune system seems to be working, maybe overdrive. That's a good thing. Let's just be more aware of how to support that. That doesn't make money, but it would really help people not only to have a more balanced perspective, but balanced inside on what's going on. So how to do that within a capitalistic system? I think I'd look at how money is saved, right? So a kind of a long-winded answer for that.
Yeah, hard. When I heard you say capitalize on the things that are working, I was like, if only we could figure out under capitalism how to capitalize on that.
Well, and that's the hard part. And having been a pharmacist, we've had to justify, because we usually can't bill for our clinical services, we've had to justify cost savings. And that's how we justify preventing medication overuse. So there would need to be vast studies to show that saves money, which takes time and resources.
Right.
Yeah.
I think there's also such implications for this idea for just neurodivergent people in general too, or neurodiverse people, whatever term you use. Because I do like career coaching for neurodivergent people and find that like this experience of being told you're a problem and you have problems and you have this problem and that problem and the other problem and you can't do this and you can't do that and why do you suck at this and why do you do that wrong, and like it's just this mountain of that. And I find people who have literally never even started to access their unique gifts, their unique abilities. There's things that they can do really quickly, synthesis that they can accomplish. There's empathy that they have that they don't even realize other people don't have access to. Like they have these unique abilities, but because they don't get to use them or capitalize on them, they don't realize how rare and valuable they are. And they're totally in that I lack mindset, just underwater, trying to be good enough, trying to get just to meet this bar and without accessing any of what makes them so capable of clearing that bar, because they're always focused on the problem.
What you're doing for people right there as a coach is you're helping them look at what's working for them. Right. You're helping them to not be focused on their problems or what doesn't work and helping them to see how it does work, which I imagine helps them feel empowered and able to move forward, right?
Right. And it's the only thing that
Yeah.
solves the problem. Like the irony is like these problems aren't getting solved by being told
No.
that you're inadequate or trying, the same thing over and over again and it doesn't work. Oh, make a list and you'll just make a list of the things you have to do and you'll get it done, right? When you have ADHD, like you can make all the lists someone's telling you to do from a neurotypical or linear, lens. Right. As long as you're trying to pretend you're a linear thinker, pretend you're a neurotypical mind, you're going to keep failing, and that problem is going to persist and get worse. So but I love the way you describe it and the negativity bias. I hadn't heard it talked about that way before, so that's really helpful. Mm-hmm. And I want to move to like the just even interrogating how we think about health. And if anyone listening to this is thinking, yeah, I do think about like health problems. I never think about my health in terms of what's working, and also the broader context of what impacts our health, right? Because many of the women that I've encountered in like women career coaching are having physiological symptoms that are only alleviated by leaving toxic bosses or workplaces. Some even end up hospitalized before realizing that it's because they're totally burned out at work. And it's such a real phenomenon. A lot of us know people this has happened to, but it's not really legitimized or it's not certainly not solved for. I mean, how can people who want to take power over their health and understanding back into their own hands, like pay attention and attend to what our bodies are saying to us about our environments and our relationships, and come to understand that our bodies are even saying anything about those things?
Yeah. Oh my God, I had so many thoughts as you were asking that.
Really long question.
No, it's great. That's my brain goes. So one thing I do in my relationship coaching is ask. So when people start complaining about something or like their partner, I say, how are you feeling as you tell me about this? Because one, we try and avoid our feelings in all kinds of ways. But two, it brings to awareness that just thinking about it, our heart rate goes up, our throat clenches, our breathing gets shallow or quicker, or we heat up, right? So we're releasing cortisol. And so becoming aware of our triggers, aware of our mind and where it's going and what it's doing to our body, like that's the first step. However you get there, I don't care. Everyone goes, oh, you got to do meditation. You got to do this much per day. I'm like, screw that. Just become more aware, however that works. And I think I want to make sure I'm answering your question. So stop me if I go like,
I'm so immersed in what you're saying. I'm not even paying attention to that.
Okay. But that's a way to start to realize what's happening inside. Because from there, we can start to see, oh, well, when I feel this, I think this, and then I act this certain way, and that's really not healthy for me. And then it creates this situation, or you start to learn when you overeat or don't eat, or all the habits, right? Or relationship habits that lead to stress and whatnot. And that's also when we realize it's a trauma response. Often we think, people in chaotic relationships go, they don't realize, like, why can't I get out of this? Because it's probably familiar from your childhood. We repeat patterns until we learn differently. Yeah. So when I was I'll just finish with this. When I was in pharmacy, I was like, God, we're not really helping people by throwing pills at them. We're not getting to the root of things. I did a functional medicine fellowship. And 3 years later, I'm like, crap, I'm really not at the root of things until people can make the changes they need to make for themselves and be empowered. And that goes to what I just said. When people are empowered to start making those changes, everything shifts. Then they make the changes in their life that are creating the stress, that are causing the autoimmune issues. They leave the job that didn't work for them, the abusive relationship, whatever it is.
So for anyone who's listening to this who might have that like little niggling thought that's like, your relationship kind of causes you a lot of stress and anxiety, or like, are you happier with that than you wouldn't be, like, those thoughts that we have to get honest with ourselves, we don't want to have, right? We're like, I don't want to sit with that and put that right in front of me and face it, right?
Mhm.
I'd rather kind of downplay and dismiss and, oh, I hate Dr. Amy Baker now just because she said that and made me feel that way. And like, we'd rather take on those feelings than really let those thoughts have space. That sounds like that's kind of like the very first step is notice what's happening in your body, right? Like what happened in your body while Dr. Amy Baker was describing those dynamics and those experiences and working through it and noticing what's happening in your like the throat clenching, the heat, where do you feel it in your body? And for me, a big part has been like not assigning meaning, right? That's the first thing we want to do is like, oh, I'm feeling this in my throat because it means this or that. Like that gets in the way of even noticing what's happening in your body. So it's just like, just noticing and just allowing and just being present to and not lying to ourselves, right?
Totally.
I think that's once we can get over the hill of lying to ourselves, I feel like so much becomes possible.
Yeah. And at that moment, we are choosing to be with what's happening, which means we are in choice. And when we acknowledge that we are always in choice, we start to see where we choose to do unhealthy things.
And we start to reclaim
Or
the
healthy.
agency that we think we don't have in these dynamics.
Yeah.
Yep. Amazing. Well, I'm going to try to find a way to bring quantum physics into this conversation. So I warned you a little bit before we went live that I find a lot of nonlinear thinkers who love to talk about and engage on this and on all the recent experiments and discoveries and confirmations coming out of quantum physics and quantum mechanics, whereas linear thinkers prefer to avoid it, maybe for the reasons we just described, right? You start seeing cracks in the foundation. There can be difficulty holding an idea in front of you that runs contrary to everything you believe to be true and your beliefs about the nature of reality as we know it and all that. But I find nonlinear thinkers kind of enjoy thinking about and talking through those things. And these discoveries in this space really do call into question so many of the existing assumptions about the nature of reality, including health and how our bodies work. So when it comes to health, there must be so many implications there. Do you have any thoughts on that?
On quantum physics and the relationship to health and whatnot? Or
just like if some of what we're learning to be true, right, and quantum entanglement and all of that, and then how we currently think about our bodies and like things coming up as problems, and we treat the symptoms but not the root cause, but like the relationship also between our emotions and our physical health and stress and relationships and our physical health. And like, do you have anything to share, any reflections on that?
Yeah, and part of this really came through studying with Dr. John DeMartini. He's been talking about this way before quantum entanglement in our literal quantum entanglement from person to person has been, I say it's proven, I don't know. So we actually have a charge. Our thoughts are polarized, meaning there's a positive or negative charge, literally. And somehow, and I haven't been reading up on this lately, but I'll just give a personal experience. When we change our perception, positive or negative about something, where we are polarized, and we change our perception about someone in our life, especially if it's really, really polarized to the positive or the negative, we create somehow a shift in their realities. We shift reality. And personal experience is I was working through the DeMartini method on my daughter, who has not spoken with me for 3 years, or my family. And 2 days after working on her, she texted my mom. Coincidence? I don't know. But things shift when we balance our perception, like I was talking about at the very beginning. I think it's worth entertaining ideas like that. I don't believe in this is the way or this is the way. Like, there's too many unknowns. I think it's really worth entertaining when we shift. If our nervous systems affect each other, and they do show, we can co-regulate with a partner through, even on Zoom, I can co-regulate with you. If I'm calm and you make eye contact with me, it will relax your nervous system and vice versa. If we
Yeah.
can do that through a screen, who's to say when we manage our nervous systems, we don't affect the people dear to us, even if they're across the world?
Right. And when we do know that particles could be entangled across the world, across the galaxy, if they needed to be across the universe, as far as we know. So absolutely, that makes a lot of sense. And there is an element too of like, I think it has been proven that people, there's a term for it in psychology, that people will behave like the version of them that you are treating them as, right? Like if you keep treating someone like they're incompetent, they will start literally making more mistakes and behaving, more incompetently in front of you, right? Like that, there's plenty of evidence of that, right? And you wonder if there's more to it than just that interperson interaction, like you're saying, even thoughts about someone, even perceptions about someone, about a relationship on its own could be having that same kind of subtle effect. So it's just something really fascinating to consider, how our beliefs about everyone around us are constructs of our own mind. They live. The version of you that exists in my mind is a version of you that only exists there, right? Like it's like a part of me.
Right.
This version of Amy. It's not accurate. It's not the same thing that anyone else has. It's not how you see yourself, and yet there is like an Amy that lives in my mind, and because she lives in my mind, she is technically a part of me. She can show up in my dreams tonight and be like, oh, a piece of me is being Amy, right? Like I'm a lucid dreamer, so I correlate a lot of stuff with dreams and kind of experimenting in that world. But I like how that dovetails together, how much power we do have over who each other is, how regulated we are, and our culture doesn't teach us to understand that at all.
Well, and going back to healthcare and capitalizing what you're saying, when we identify as a disease, that becomes our identity and we won't let it go. And so I don't like when people say, I am XYZ, right? I am a diagnosis, because then our ego gets attached to it, and then we don't have the capability to change. So if we identify it, so if we can change to what's working there, right? Or shift the frame, that gives us choice and agency.
Yeah, that's
perception
probably
creates reality.
And that explains the difference between people who do want to identify like I do, saying I am autistic, because there's so much power in it. Because it's not like, for me, it's not a disease; it's a superpower, right? And you're talking about different types of diseses. But then other people who they hear someone say that, or they hear someone describe their child that way, and because they see it as such a black mark, it's like, don't call your child autistic, right? Like, don't call him. It's that same, like, it's such a negative thing to identify as, but it's that same, like, that's why I don't say it in front of that many people, because I'm like, I don't want to take on your energy around what you think that word means. And then I suddenly have to feel the perception that you have of me turn in that dark, negative, infantilizing, whatever it is, direction that you're going to be putting on me. But in my own mind and among my own, nonlinear friends, it's very easy to say, and it means something, so different. So that's that's such a great point. Like identifying as anything, even beyond a disease, like the things that we say, we lend more gravity to and realness, and manifest more heft around whatever that thing is when we identify that way. Why do you think, I mean, there's probably a long answer to this question, but why is it imperative for individuals, right? If we go back to, solving these problems, fixing these industries, especially organizational leaders, to heal our trauma and develop self-awareness, instead of continuing with this external, I have to fix the person I'm in a relationship with, I have to fix the organization I'm a part of, I have to fix, if I can just get this person to act this way or do this thing. Like, why is it so imperative to turn inward and heal our own trauma and develop that self-awareness around where we get reactive and dysregulated? What is the impetus behind that? What's the payoff behind that?
Oh, the payoff. Well, first off, we get agency over our lives. No one's going to do it for us. Right? Like, no one's going to come in and swoop in and rescue us and be our Prince Charming or mommy or whatever. So the first thing is to have agency over our lives, because for all I know, I've got this one short life. And moving from victim to author is pretty amazing. And when you do that, you help others do that. You model behaviors. I mean, it's a selfish thing to do that is absolutely not selfish, because it transforms, like we were saying, it transforms people around you and around the world. I think you were asking the impetus for it. Is that?
No, I think that's you answered exactly the question I intended to ask, but I probably didn't ask properly. Our minds are communicating better than our words are. Yeah, exactly. Like that idea of this is the best way to help others is to help ourselves. I think this is such a hard idea to grasp in our society, in the way that we've been acculturated. It's like, no, I help someone else by, fixing them. How do I fix them? Why can't I fix them? And then everything will be okay when they're fixed, right? And how many people are thinking that about all of us? Be like, oh, if I could just get that person to stop being, this way, that way, to have this level of self-awareness. I think it's very hard to understand that changing ourselves changes those around us.
Yeah, and that means taking accountability for how our life is currently, no matter how hard that reality is. Because then you have choice. Once you've said, okay, this is my life, I've chosen everything in it. I've chosen my relationships, I've chosen my lifestyle. Now what? And usually there's a bunch of shame or grief or anger and stuff that comes with that. But man, is it worth it? I had something else, but I lost it.
Hopefully it comes back in the next couple minutes. Worth it to regain that agency, right? Because I do think a lot of the most miserable people, or people who sound the most miserable, are also claiming a complete lack of agency and complete and total helplessness in our lives. And I've been in that situation, like a work situation before. In some ways, it's easier to be totally, to be like, oh, I'm a complete suffering victim. Oh my God, like it's so hard to be me. And it is a very miserable place to be. But the secret is, if you can claim it and then regain agency over your life, you might feel a lot of guilt and shame around what you've quote unquote allowed to happen. It's very hard to find the words to describe kind of what that experience is like. But then the liberation that's on the other side of reclaiming that agency is always worth it.
It's huge. And here's one thing too, bringing it back to a lot of the work that I've trained in, is like, people do things because they see more benefits than drawbacks. Every situation has equal benefits and drawbacks. And so, again, we're looking at balancing the perception. And so when someone sees, like, I might ask someone, so one, you say, I've chosen, the sound just went out. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah.
One, you say, I've chosen this job, or to stay in this, or whatever situation. But the next part is, and I just got a brain lapse. Oh, to see like, what benefits do I get from this victim stance? Because I'm getting benefit from it. Maybe I'm getting attention from my mom or attention from my spouse, and that's the only way I know how to get it. Maybe it's the only way to get attention to my boss. And so we have to acknowledge the benefits of the victim stance. They're not, without making it bad. It just is. And then say, okay, are you willing to let go of that benefit to step out of the victim role? Or find another way to do it, right? Find a more adult, balanced way of asking for attention. Or can you actually ask for what you need instead of playing the victim to get what you need and manipulate the situation?
And sometimes it's attention, sometimes it's validation, sometimes it could be all kinds of things, right? And that just answered one of my last questions, which is around like, what are the first steps that someone can take toward this kind of transformation? So that's great. I know we're just about out of time. I just want to throw out a quote from you that I mentioned before, just so people hear it, from another interview you did, where you said that our society is built on capitalizing on dysregulated nervous systems. I just want people to like sit with that idea. We don't have time to expound on it as we're going to wrap up here, but what does it look like when you resource your nervous system, when you are able to confront that trauma, to take back that agency, to take that accountability, to then no longer be, as you said in that interview, unmanipulable or manipulatable in a society, or to be exploited. And then that's how you help others, right? So just resurfacing that same idea, just to recap a few of the things that you brought up, that moving from victim to author is the best way to help ourselves and to help others and to help the world and change the world. A lot of nonlinear thinkers are like, oh my God, the world, how do I save the world? How do I fix the world? Right? Like right here, we all have the power to do that. You mentioned how in the healthcare system, we don't treat humans as humans. What a simple and clear way of describing that. I want to pull that back up, that we have a negativity bias in our culture. We're always looking for the negative thing. What's wrong? What's the problem? And that's what we're feeding energy into. And that's what we're growing, and not giving energy to what's working. How acknowledging where we are is a choice, right? Being able to acknowledge where we are, and then you're in choice when you're doing that. And then being in choice, the first step toward having that agency. Same with when we identify as a disease, or we identify with something we don't want to be, we again are reinforcing that identity. So there you have it, everyone. You've heard it from our esteemed thought leader. I'm going to give you a second to give us any final words of wisdom, Amy, before we wrap up. And I want to hear from anyone in the comments, what's sticking for you, how you think about things differently after what we heard from Amy today. Amy, any final words to help people activate their own nonlinear potential?
You recapped it really well. But honestly, find ways to slow down and just be aware of what's going on inside, whatever that means. Take a deep breath and just slow down.
And it's uncomfortable. The first time you really slow down, you're gonna be like, "Ooh, oh my gosh, I need to speed up again. I'm so scared."
Yeah.
Right. But
and understand it's a journey, and we're never going to get there, and we're going to constantly be pulled back into old patterns. Yes. And it's the same pattern, but you've gained tools.
Yes.
So don't expect it to go away, because then you'll bring it closer.
Right. And don't expect that you have transcended it, and therefore this new thing that you're encountering that looks like that pattern, but it can't be that pattern because I'm over that pattern. No, it's still the pattern.
It's still the pattern. And it's okay.
Thank you so much, Amy. This was so fun. I am so glad to know you. There you have it, everybody. A taste from another one of the incredible founding minds, the Octopus Movement. Please remember to embrace what makes you weird, to unleash your nonlinear superpowers, and join this movement for a future that blooms. That's it for today. Looking forward to swimming with everyone next time. Thank you again, Amy. It was an absolute pleasure, and happy Juneteenth.
Thank you. You too.